Hi everyone, I'm Sharad Kumar. I'm the field CTO of data. A little bit of background, about 15 years, purely in cloud and data, a lot more experience overall before that. I came to Qlik through an acquisition of a company called Mosaic Data, where I was building out a platform for data products. We'll talk about that a little more. Before that, I was at Accenture. I was the CTO of data and AI globally. So I work with some of the largest data-driven customers out there. So if you look at the subject of trusted data foundation for AI, as everybody embarks on building these AI systems, and I'm including in AI, Gen AI, modern Gen AI as well, we cannot ignore the importance of data because that's the foundation. So you have to make sure you get your foundation right, the data foundation right, and make sure you're preparing your data for consumption by AI systems. So if you look at the first one there, create AI-ready data pipeline. Tim just demonstrated last 15, 20 minutes how you take data, how you ingest data, how do you join it, transform it, cleanse it, and prepare it for AI. We've purely focused on, right now, he showed a lot of use cases around data warehousing, showed use cases around how you vectorize the data consumption by Gen AI, but also part of that is getting the data ready for AI, feature engineering, building new features, preparing the data so traditional machine learning can consume. So all that is part of getting your data ready for AI ML projects as well as Gen AI projects. The second thing is what we're doing is we are leveraging AI within our platform itself to bring automation, right, to bring acceleration. So I'll give you some examples. When we look at the data, we're able to apply machine learning to detect PII information. Are there sensitive elements within the data that need to be protected? We're working on things like as you come in, you're a data steward, you need to define data quality rules. Rather than starting from scratch, we'll start recommending, the machine will start recommending which data quality rules are applicable for your data set. Tim demonstrated how we're using AI within our pipelining, where you can write a natural language prompt and be able to convert that into a SQL query, right, automatically. So there are multiple places within our platform, everything from data engineering to data governance, we're applying AI, right, using traditional ML as well as Gen AI capabilities, really accelerate and automate and improve the productivity of a lot of these data engineering tasks. Then the next thing we're doing is really talking about what does it mean to have your data foundation ready for AI? What does it mean to have your data ready for AI? So I'll talk through, so what we're talking about in Talend, we used to have something called the Trust Score. So you would have multiple dimensions in terms of how you would look at data and know your data is good. But what we're doing is we are extending the Trust Score to a Qlik Talend Trust Score for AI. And what we have come up with is 6 principles to really ensure that your data is ready for AI. So let's talk about these a little bit very quickly. So first is diversity of data. So you want to make sure that the data that you're training your machine learning models on or using it is diverse. You're not doing it on very siloed data, because if you use siloed data, you're going to have biased results, right? You're going to have bias in your AI system. So what does it mean from a capability perspective? That means you want to acquire data from a variety of sources, everything from mainframes, SAP, databases, streams, files, of different type of thing, and you have to make sure your data has all the different patterns and nuances that are applicable to the problem. So data has to be wide, data has to be diverse. So you have to make sure that the machine is not making biased and unfair predictions, right? The second principle is that your data needs to be secure. So these are a lot of the machine learning algorithms and Gen AI working on data that may have privacy information in there, financial information in there, proprietary information in there. So you want to make sure that these machines are not leaking that information, and you want to safeguard the trustworthiness and the reputation of your AI. Right? So that's the second principle. That means when you bring in data into the platform, you want to make sure you're detecting PI, you're protecting it, you're mapping it to a privacy tier, you're applying the right kind of protection on it, like masking, tokenization, access control, who can access what data. So all these principles around data protection and access management, you need these principles to make sure data is secure, to have it ready for AI. The third principle is timeliness. So you want to make sure you're always feeding fresh, up-to-date data to AI systems. So Tim was talking about in the end how we're able to do change data capture from sources and flow that information through the pipeline. So traditionally, we would constantly refresh the data warehouse for BI, but now we'll refresh a vector store constantly to make sure that you are building and your machine is always answering questions on the latest and the freshest data, so your predictions are accurate and precise. So fourth is consumability. So this we already showed that you need to make sure you're preparing data that can be consumed easily. So if I'm talking about training my machine learning algorithm, I may want data in a file, and the data has to be very wide, right? Not dimensional like you typically need for BI, because data scientists like to have wide columns and a lot of data kind of denormalized. For GenAI, Tim already showed how you need to have data in a vector form. So you can build RAG applications based on LLM to integrate with that. So the different type of targets you need to create from your data, business-ready data, so it can be consumed very easily by AI ML. And we already showed that how in a platform we're building support for these different types of consumption mechanisms. The next thing is your data needs to be accurate, right? So we all talk about your AI is only as good as your data. So if your data is not accurate, it's not of good quality, then your AI system that you build it on, it's not going to be trustworthy, it's not going to be reliable, it's not going to be effective. And how do you make sure data is accurate? Is when data comes in, you got to check on the quality. You need to make sure the data is not skewed. If you have a lot of gaps in your data, you may have to solve for that. If there's a lot of data duplication, you may have to dedupe the data. If your data has a lot of outliers, you may have to remove that so your algorithm is not skewed towards those data. So be able to build those quality checks on the data, be able to constantly monitor the quality of the data and observe your pipelines. Are they running properly? Is the data flowing? That's a very important capability you need to have to make sure that it's ready for AI. And the last one is discoverability, to make sure that data users can easily, or data scientists can easily find the data. They can understand the data. They can understand the context of the data. I think you asked earlier, if the table is table 1, table 2, they're not going to understand what it means. So what you need to do is you need to make sure there's enough business semantics around it. There's business metadata tied to it. Even though table name could be table 1, you can create a business name on that. Okay, this is the order table. So as a business user, data scientist, I can find and understand and know the right context to use in my models, right? So what we have done is we have rolled all these 6 dimensions into something called a Qlik Talend Trust Score for AI. So we're going to demonstrate that right now.
All right, so what we're going to show you is a couple of elements around the Trust Score for AI. First thing we want to talk about is, we've talked a little bit about cloud and what we're doing there, but we're also investing heavily in Talend Studio. So a lot of you probably know what Studio is and Data Fabric, but if you don't, this is the design capability to support a wide variety of data integration scenarios, right? So ETL, Dan mentioned, but application to application integration. I can actually graphically design APIs here instead of having to write the code for them. And here in this pipeline, I'm pulling data from Kafka, right, to do some streaming capabilities. I could do Spark-based workloads here, a whole variety. Whether I'm running it on-premise, in a hybrid cloud, it runs on what we call a remote engine so that you can control the data plane and from a sovereignty perspective, how the data is processed. So I'm going to fire this guy off just so we can start and take a little look at this job as it's running. So first thing is the data quality aspects. Talend's been well known for data quality, so we're continuing to invest in that from an IP perspective. And you can see here I'm using different components to do some data quality and validity check, right? Verifying emails. I'm doing some PII masking here. It's a real eye chart here, I apologize, but down here I'm selecting some columns to mask, right? To ensure that if that data is going out for AI use cases, that it's the appropriate data that's being sent out. But what we're also doing as we invest in Talend Studio is we're bringing AI workloads into Studio. And so here I've got a component that is calling out to OpenAI. Now I could use this for a similar use case that we showed earlier, to send data, to vectorize the data, and to do the embeddings, and to send it out to a vector store. But as the Swiss Army knife of data integration solutions, I can use this for much, much more. So here what we're doing is actually, and again, I'm sorry, it's a bit of an eye chart here, but I'm getting a Kafka payload that is a sentence, essentially, from a customer telling me I have an issue with a delivery. And I'll run the job in a minute to show that being ingested. And we're using AI and an LLM to classify that semi-structured or unstructured statement. Right? So I could write a ton of code trying to figure out, is this a product problem? Is it a technical problem? Is it a delivery problem? But the LLM allows me to push that data through it and understand and classify the issue. So now from a Kafka perspective, I can actually route that through my streaming pipeline to the appropriate operational system, as well as delivering it down to S3 for BI or other type of workloads. Right? Well, now this extends all kinds of use cases. I'm actually using that same component here, and I'm going to go ahead and run this job so you can see what happens in the outbound sound. I'm using this in order to generate a test data set. Right? So that's a common use case people talk about with LLMs, is using it to generate test data. This is generating a set of messages for me in order for me to test my classification problem. Right? So you'll see they've received orders, they're disappointed to find the product was damaged, right? So this one has been classified as dissatisfaction with the product. We'll have some others, if it did it randomly, which it didn't do it randomly enough. Live demos this morning, it gave me different classifications, right? But you can see how I can start to bring AI workloads now and just use the extensibility of Studio to bring AI and LLMs into my actual workloads and use it for transformation routines.
Will you support function calling? Like obviously the OpenAI models have function calling ability. Do you think, does it support it now, or will it do in the future where you could have, different branches depending on what you got back from the LLM's initial query to then send it different places?
Yeah. I mean, this is our first foray, right? We have this. Pinecone is coming out as a vector store support as well. The team that owns this are looking at all types of other capabilities. Obviously, here you can select a different model regarding OpenAI. But we also have customers that have inquired about, well, what if I run an LLM, especially very large customers that we have, they're running LLMs in their own data centers, right? And certain customers, like I used to work in financial services, are probably never going to use OpenAI. So yeah, we'll be extending this as we go forward. This is the first step. But we think, as we move forward, this is going to open up a lot of opportunities for us and our customers, right? And obviously here you can route data however you see fit because it's an ETL technology, right? Those other capabilities, you can do them today in Studio because it's a Java-based component. So you can actually use it to write some of that code yourself. But we want to make it easier through these built-in components. Right? So the Trust Score for AI is the other component that we wanted to cover. Let me bring in here. I'm just going to drag this in. So the Trust Score for AI leverages existing and some new components inside Studio. And really what it is it's a framework. Right? Your requirements for each of your customers in every organization around how they view data from an AI use case perspective and how they want to capture the metrics around that data and the KPIs are going to be different, even within the same industry, right? Based off of regulatory or other types of requirements that you have internally. So this is an example of a job that delivers data to a pre-built data mart, which is part of the framework. So we're capturing metrics, we can capture metadata, we can capture data profiling to deliver it to this structure. And then at the end of the day, we can expose it through, and of course I'm signed out. But we expose it through a QlikSense dashboard. Once I open here, probably being connected to VPN isn't helping. So the dashboard exposes those different dimensions that Sharad talked about. So we can pick a specific use case here. I could actually pick data sets. So if there's a number of data sets that I want to use for a new use case, I can look at those specifically and understand are those valid for my new use case? Do I want to move forward with them? So if we take a look at, say, accuracy, and this is that extension of the Trust Score that Talend had from a proprietary IP perspective. You can see we're using the general Trust Score here around validity, The accuracy has improved over time, and that's because we're remediating continuously the jobs from a Talend Studio perspective. And we have recommendations down here on what to do if we find data from a, out of value, out of bounds perspective.
So you might have said this already, but
Yeah, sorry.
what are you basing so the score is here, it's great, it's really interesting. And what are you basing the back end of that on? Is it all configurable to a customer's environment, or are you basing it on the new US regulations that have just come out? Like, what's kind of the back end?
It's all currently configurable based off of the customer's environment. It's not specific to one regulatory organization or geographical location.
And is there like a jump start to get people started?
I believe so. I'm not as versed on this, Dan. Yes.
No, the answer is that we package this up as a framework that's available to customers with the new Qlik Talend Cloud. So all of the metadata or all of the data mart collection, all of what you're collecting is configurable as well. So you can define what it is that you want to set for thresholds. All of that data is in the data mart. And when you go to the QlikSense application, the value of basing this on QlikSense is that we've built out a default application, but it allows you to fully customize it, again, based on the project, based on the data set. So this is it's the flexibility that you need, because again, every application is different. Regulatory environments are very different, even on an application by application and data set by data set. So
speaking of regulatory stuff, awkward question. How are you dealing with location awareness and things like GDPR and the fact that you need to be able to take customers and make them removed from the system?
Yep. You want to take that one? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that would be something that you would need to do through the pipeline capability, right? I mean, what you could do with the trust score, like if you look at security is probably where that would tie into. We're looking at and doing profiling if we expose PII. Oftentimes when people have GDPR regulations and requirements, that there's an understanding of which customers need to be removed. So we could use the capabilities that we have in Studio to extend the framework and allow us to validate against, say, customer data sets or customer data products. Is that customer data still available? Has it been cleansed? Has it been removed completely? Generally with GDPR, you have to remove it completely, right? You can't even leave the identifier of the customer there. So we could extend the trust score and the framework to fit that based off of the customer's explicit requirements. And their data sets are going to be in different places, right? So that's the value of leveraging Studio. It has all this great connectivity. So if your data set is in Kafka, or if it's in S3, or if it's in a JDBC-based connection or an API, we can plug that into whatever you need to, and then drive it into this framework, right?
And it's able to handle things like our data's in Europe and it has to stay in Europe.
That's fine, because from a processing engine perspective, when you build these jobs, talent execution, because it's sort of ETL, we have what we call remote engines. Mm-hmm. So you orchestrate from our cloud, and it's purely an orchestration layer. The engine you can then deploy into Europe. It could be in your own on-premise data center. It could be in any hyperscaler. And that job would then run there, and the data processing would occur there. Oh. And we can just deliver the metrics, right? Likewise, if you needed it in US or Canada, data can't leave Canada, right? Same thing. So you can deploy as many of these engines to as many geographical locations.
You could put them wherever you need to.
Absolutely.
Based on wherever your business units are.
Yeah. And that's entirely the way we process data when we do it from an ETL perspective. Right? We never lift the data into our cloud to process it. It's all based off of
it's all handled on your engine.
Okay. So as you can see, we're leveraging a lot of our capabilities, building an extensible framework to support any of your customer requirements. What we'll do now is turn it back over to Dan and Sharad so that they can talk about what we're doing from a data product perspective, which ties into another dimension here around discoverability and having those data artifacts that you're building be accessible by different consumers for different use cases.
So as Tim was talking about, another new capability we are bringing out as part of Qlik Talend Cloud is support for data products. So as Dan was talking about earlier, we need to get from data to outcomes. To get from data to outcomes, you should simply look at the two major types of stakeholders involved. One is data producers and one is data consumers, and they need to work together, right? So data producers typically source the data, prepare the data, integrate the data, get it ready, and the data consumers are the ones who build the analytics to get some outcomes and insights from the data. But there's been a challenge in the current way of working when I look across all our clients. A lot of the data production is in the hand of centralized IT. And they often don't understand the business needs, their use cases, how they want to use the data, how to protect the data. They have their own challenge. And the data consumers have a challenge is the data is not in the form they can use. They don't know where to search and find the data, how to use it for their purpose, how to build trust in the data. So they have their own challenges. So there actually a gap exists between producers and consumers. And there's a new architecture paradigm that's emerged in the industry called data products, which is part of an overall data mesh concept. So what does data product mean? Data products are a way to bridge this gap between producers and consumers. So if you look at some of the key characteristics of data product it really talks about federation and agility. That means instead of centralized IT always handling data, building pipelines, integrating data, preparing data, you split this into different domains. So domains like sales, finance, operations, right? So you take your business, you break down into these, and these are already their lines of business or domains, and you create data products within those domains. So for example, from a supply chain domain, I may have a sales order data product. And the key thing about data products is they bring ownership, accountability, and trust to data. They go to a lot of customer organizations and say, who owns this data? And nobody raises their hand. So what happens in the world of data products is each one of those hexagon you see, which is a data product, there is a data product owner who is responsible for sourcing the data, packaging the data, making sure it's trustworthy, making sure it's of good quality, making sure it's secure. All those principles we talked about, 6 principles we talked about, the data product owner ensures that the data product adheres to that. And you're bringing product thinking to that. That means it has a life cycle, it has versioning. You treat your consumers as customers. You know who's using the data product. If it's not getting used, I can retire the data product. If it's getting more use, I can add more features to it, functions. It's just like a product. It's a reusable thing. It's highly curated. It's trustworthy. So what we are adding support in Qlik Talend Cloud is capability for data product owners to create these data products within different domains using different capabilities. So they can package data into a data product, provide quality rules, who can access it, how can they access the data, create version 1, and activate it. And the second capability within there we are offering is a data product marketplace, where data consumers can come and search and find these data products easily. They can build trust in them. They can learn how to use them. There may be sample code as part of that. They can request access to them. They can request enhancements on the products. They can say who else, what are people doing with this data product, and ultimately use the data product for the use case. So bringing out support for data product as part of Qlik Talend Cloud.
So is this kind of your interpretation of like a data mesh architecture within Qlik?
So it is actually a data mesh. But what we are focusing on the most practical and tangible aspect of data mesh, which is data product.
Okay.
So productizing data, because data mesh has a lot of other social things, organizational things, but we are focusing on the most important aspect of it, which is really bringing product thinking to data, to bring accountability, ownership, and trust into data, to make it more consumable. So it's less about governing data, it's more about making data more consumable.
All right.
To drive faster time to outcome for the business users.
The name is a little frustrating to me because a lot of the data byproducts are what are being used. In your case, they're being cast aside or cast off by the users, your data users, or they're actually being created by your users, what you've got here. But then you're saying all of that scattered around data that might be being breadcrumbs from a data user or something that they've created, then the operations people take that and make it into a data product.
Yeah. So
terminology is a little.
No. So what happens is, think of a data product. So let's take a simple example. If I talk about a sales order, That means if I'm owner of a sales order data product, that means I'm responsible for making sure I'm pulling all the data for sales order. It may be coming from SAP, somewhere else. I'm the one, or my team rather, is responsible for bringing the data together, integrating it. I understand my users. I understand their use cases. I know how they want to consume the data, in what form and shape they want to consume the data. So I'll make sure I structure it into that form. I'll make sure the right quality rules on it. So I'll make the data trustworthy and consumable, and I'm responsible for the life cycle of the data product. Somebody else may be responsible for a data product within HR, which is an employee data product. So you federate out. There's no central person responsible for all data pipelining. Today, we're building very large, complex data pipelines. And this, think of it, now you break that problem into smaller. Each group there is responsible for their own pipeline. You don't do enterprise-wide data model anymore. Your data model is important within the context of your data product.
So,
right?
yeah, I'm having a problem with this. In my head, like kind of not wrapping my head around what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but I'm thinking from a business operations, that's always the harder part. I think the business operations, getting them straight. I've been talking about this already this week with Frederick. The business operations piece of things, I think, is harder than the data cleaning. Because sales is a great example. If whatever the data product is, if it's going to screw up sales and get in the way of them selling the most spiffable widget out there, they're going to get around it and they're not going to use it. So if you don't have a team of people building data products in a way that it's beneficial to what sales wants to do, and if it's very segmented and very siloed almost is what I think I heard.
No, it's not siloed. It's actually countered exactly what you're saying. The team responsible for building the data product is very connected to the user. So if I'm building a sales data product, today what happened is all that people sourcing are sitting in IT. Now what happens is the data product owner actually brings business and IT together. So you have a team which has representation from the business. So it's a cross-functional team. You may have a data engineer, you may have a business analyst sitting within a sales domain, creating this data product. You don't have back-end IT engineers just creating in silo. So it does exactly what you're saying. They know the use cases, so they're able to build the data product that is very, very relevant to the use cases that sales is trying. So instead of sales pulling this data and doing things themselves, now they can reuse the data product. And that's kind of the whole purpose. It improves reusability of it, it reduces time to market. There's somebody else who's the owner of it, who's responsible for keeping it up to date, making sure it's good quality. So the actual consumer doesn't have to worry about it.
Going back to let me find it. What did you guys call it? Your trust score IT.
Yeah.
And the diversity of data. Is there any way that once you get this system in place from a business perspective, right? Once I get this system in place, here's the owner of the data product and here's this, do you think that would lead to lessening the diversity of data or concentrating on a certain thing so important pieces are left out so that they're not seen by anybody?
No, so good question. What typically you do is data product, just like a real product, is an iterative development. So if I'm solving for 2 use cases, I will get diverse enough data to satisfy those 2 use cases. And then version 2 of it, I may add more use cases. So overall, you want diversity in data, which is pertinent to the use case you're trying to solve. So right now what happens is we start boiling the ocean. So now I know if I'm creating a data product, I'm satisfying these 5 use cases in sales. I need to make sure I get the right diversity of data to solve those 2 use cases to satisfy the diversity dimension. And then continuously evolve my data product through different versions, bring in more data, integrate it more, provide more value through it. I'm providing through a SQL interface, start exposing it through a REST API so application developers can start to leverage it. Right? So expand the horizon of use cases and over versioning of data products, enhance it, just like we do with real products. And again, we have on the shop floor, we have demos, we have people, we can get into more details.
Well, I'm going to wrap it up. We went over, so we're very excited about all the things that we've developed, as you can see. Definitely, it's been a great year bringing together the best of Qlik and talent integration capabilities. Our orientation on AI as a use case, right? The focus for us is twofold. One, how do we use AI within our own tooling to increase developer productivity? And we showed you some of those examples. And how do we support AI use cases and emerging AI use cases? So we talked about the pipelines. We talked about how we get data, ensure that it's ready for AI use cases. We didn't even get into some of the things that we're doing with our partners like Snowflake and Databricks and others in supporting their own infrastructures and some of the functions, the AI functions that they're building into their products and pipelines that we supported. So there's an awful lot of things going on. I hope this has begun to scratch the surface and to give you an appreciation for some of the things that we're doing, and you know, the opportunity. With data comes opportunity. We're the guys that are focused on the data and helping our customers to do that. So I appreciate the time. Great questions. Thank you guys very much.